anything that I can do that's less reading.
Okay. Yeah, and also when I can email you the script and you can make the font.
That's
Sure,
good.
that'd be good.
That would be-
Yeah, really, that'd
Oh,
be
well.
fun.
I meant to ask some other folks this morning if we can get around to it.
Do you have to have all guys?
I mean, I guess it'd be ideal, but I know I probably won't get all guys.
I think
So
so.
I'd be fine with some ladies being able to do, you know, it's all men roles.
I know. Okay, I wouldn't mind, but you have to do
But you know what you
So
could do?
have a
is-
table,
What you
perhaps.
could do, you could, before the session starts, you could let the congregation know that normally it's for men roles, and then it's for ladies.
Well, we don't have any yet, though, we make sure, because we got to be in school, they don't take the kids.
I know Nathaniel's not much on that type of thing, but I might see if he wants to do
I mean, Matt would
I was gonna ask
and,
Matt.
Jake,
Jason.
Jason.
Jason did it last year, so I
Yeah.
think he can do it this year.
We may have enough men that will do it.
We might. And if not, we'll make that work. Kelsey Mama was good a couple years ago.
Yeah, I remember
Yes,
that.
you're right.
I remember that. But we got, I'm glad we used the younger guys coming in on, like you got
Like
a,
me.
what you got, Natalie husband? what's
Oh,
his
Taylor?
name?
Taylor, yeah.
You got Matt, you got Jason, you got the other Jason, I said, put them to work. Because, the older they get, they're not used to doing anything, they're not.
Yeah, they're used to it now.
Yes.
Yeah, like Jason
Why not
Rome.
Weston wants to be.
How do y'all keep putting Weston down on the you folks? See, why don't y'all let him be?
I think I agree. I think it's great.
He's a young man, he's 21.
So,
And I keep looking him after the double take, because I taught him in Sunday school, and I'm like, I'm old.
that has been on my mind, but I haven't done anything because every year it's on my mind. And then they set the youth calendar for the year. So
Yeah.
okay, well, we'll wait till this year's over, then I'll bring it up. And then it leaves my mind. And then they set the dates.
Yeah, y'all need to think about that. I thought he need to be up every
Yeah.
week because he's good.
I think, yeah, he could be a writer or something.
Yes.
If he's open to that.
I'm sure he is. He can like this guy.
Yeah, that's the first I'd be happy to do.
Maybe I will.
Okay. Great.
But I'm just glad that we get some young guys in here. But if you don't put them to work now, they can be old when they get older. They're gonna be still sitting there not wanting to do anything. And that's like, they're gonna be.
Well,
That's right, gotta get him young.
we got Matt's speaker this summer for some teachers. Taylor's teaching teams right now.
Good,
Anything other than
See, that is good. That's right.
what, and Taylor and Daniel both volunteer.
Well, that they ain't gonna be volunteering.
I don't know if I volunteered or if I asked. If I was small group. Good to see you all tonight. I want to stand closer, but it seems like if I move too much this way, the light doesn't want to advance the slides. So I should probably keep my little station back there. That could work too, but under no obligation. But let's go ahead and begin with a word of prayer. When we sing, I'm going to have to be jumping up, not while we're singing, don't worry, but between songs, I'm going to have to jump up, change PowerPoints, and jump down, because I was telling a couple of you before, I spent the time before coming here driving Mark around while he was sleeping because of his ear infection, and so I didn't get to assemble the PowerPoint. I've got 3 separate PowerPoints, so we'll have to do that if you don't mind. But let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll get into our time together tonight. Thank you, God, for this evening. We pray your blessings on this time of singing and Bible study, and we pray that this is uplifting and informative. Grateful for this group here, and that you'll bless each one of us in the week to come. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Our first song will be let's see here. First song will be Trust and Obey. However, let's see. I think we're not going to sing all the verses, so give me just a second. All right. First song will be Trust and Obey. When we walk with the Lord in the light of His Word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the skies, but His smile quickly drives it away. Not a doubt nor a fear, not a sigh nor a tear can abide while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but our toil He doth quickly repay. Not a grief nor a loss, not a frown nor a cross, but is blessed if we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Then in fellowship sweet we will sit at His feet, or will walk by His side in the way. What He says we will do, where He sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. All right, our next song. Wait a second here. So I'm scheduled to lead singing next week, I'm pretty sure. And so I'd like to introduce this song to the whole church body next week. This song we've been singing together in here for a couple of different Bible studies, Yet Not I, but Through Christ in Me. And so you 6 are going to be clutch next Sunday. So if you can be here, please be here. And help carry this song as we introduce it to the whole church. Yet not I, but through Christ in me. What gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer? There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy, my righteousness and freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus, for my life is wholly bound to His. Oh, how strange and divine, I can sing, all is mine, yet not I, but through Christ in me. The night is dark, but I am not forsaken, for by my side the Savior He will stay. I labor on in weakness and rejoicing, for in my need His power is displayed. To this I hold, my shepherd will defend me. Through the deepest valley He will lead. Oh, the night has been won, and I shall overcome, yet not I, but through Christ in me. No fate I dread, I know I am forgiven. The future sure, the price it has been paid. For Jesus bled and suffered for my pardon, and He was raised to overthrow the grave. To this I hold, my sin has been defeated. Jesus now and ever is my plea. Oh, the chains are released, I can sing, I am free, yet not I, but through Christ in me. With every breath I long to follow Jesus, for He has said that He will bring me home, and day by day I know He will renew me, until I stand with joy before the throne. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus, all the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. All right, great. Looking forward to introducing that song next week. You guys did great singing it, and I think it'll be a real blessing to everybody. Last song, very simple one. Uh-oh. It's not what I thought it was. Same title, but different song. So we're going to use the hymnal. Sorry about that. It's on the slides. You know, some of them are called the same thing, and then you open it up, and it's not what you thought. So, turn in here to 983. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. I was thinking, we don't know exactly if it was necessarily God the Son, Jesus in that fiery furnace with those other three, or more of an angel sent from God. But either way, if you're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you have to think, just keep your eyes on that fourth person who you know is from God who's in there, and you'll be okay. And while they're in the fiery furnace. And so that brought this song to mind. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. All right. Well, let me invite you, if you've got your Bible, or if you want to pull it up on your phone or something, but let me invite you to turn to the book of Daniel. Daniel was our focus for this morning, and planning for him to also to be our focus next week as well, as we consider some very wise people in Scripture and how their lives are like kind of dim reflections of the life of Christ, and also how we can learn wisdom from the events in their lives. And so we're looking at Daniel. Daniel has some interesting similarities to Joseph, even though they lived very different times. Of course, they're in different books, different parts of the world, kind of even, where their stories are located. But similar kinds of people with similar gifts and some similar circumstances. So we focus today on, actually not Daniel, but his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who certainly display the same kind of faith that Daniel does in the book also. And their wisdom, their courage, their trust and faith, even in the moment of the fiery furnace, as they're thrown in there for only worshiping God, refusing to worship anyone else, and their deliverance as that happens. I wanted to take some time to back up at first and look with me at the first couple of verses of the whole book, Daniel chapter 1. Observation here that I think can make their commitment to worshiping only their God even more powerful. From Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. It's just kind of the opening statement of the book, summarizing the context. This is what it says. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of gold. And then there it keeps on going, setting the stage eventually, as the verses keep going, for Daniel and his three friends. But this is the setting of the book of Daniel. God's people in the land God promised them, they are attacked, overwhelmed, and the city is burned, the temple is burned, all the holy items in the temple are taken away. Lots of people die, of course, and also a lot of people are uprooted from their land and forcibly taken to a completely different land, a land that's not holy or pure because it's not the land God promised to them. They're not going to be just around their fellow Israelites, but they're going to be in a whole different culture, and they go in with the shame of defeat. They're going as a defeated people. into Babylon. And when we look at that event that is being summarized in the first couple of verses here, look at that event from a strictly human perspective. And we think about this is one king and his kingdom coming in, overthrowing another kingdom, bringing people back into exile. When we think about it from that earthly perspective, it's basically a war between Nebuchadnezzar and this guy Jehoiakim, the king of Judah at the time. And Nebuchadnezzar wins, right? So from an earthly perspective, Babylon just overpowered Judah, and that's that. But we see in the way that it's worded a different perspective here. Look at verse 2 again. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. And because of that, Nebuchadnezzar then was able to bring that stuff back to his land. So there's this earthly perspective that looks at this as this is just one king overpowering another king. Heavenly perspective, God is the one who not only permitted this to happen, but it's like he just took Judah and just handed it to Nebuchadnezzar and said, here you go. And of course, we know why this happens from other books of the Bible. This is something that God said would happen if his people were unfaithful to the covenant. And they were unfaithful for many generations. God gave them many warnings, so he didn't have to use this kind of final punishment here. But they didn't heed those warnings. And so God is being faithful to what he said he would do. But from a heavenly perspective, this isn't one king simply defeating another. And it's not just an ungodly king defeating God's people. God is in control the whole time, even when it looks like his own people are being defeated, even when they are being defeated. God gave the kingdom to the king of Babylon. And so I want us to appreciate this perspective and think about if Daniel and his friends and any other Jews in this time, if they are viewing life from that purely earthly perspective, one king just destroyed our king. This ungodly king just wiped out us, God's people. Think about how easy it would be when this temptation comes along, this command from the king to bow down and worship other gods. Think about how you probably would just want to go along with it and say, well, yeah, our God got completely, their gods mopped the floor with our God, basically. They defeated us and took us into exile. Obviously, our God, and we often pronounce his name Yahweh. We don't necessarily know that's how they said it, but obviously Yahweh can be defeated. And so, yeah, I'll worship other gods. If they're more powerful, sure. But we read here instead, as easy as it might be to take that perspective, Daniel and his friends seem to have the heavenly perspective because they still know God is in control. He's still the one true God. We're committed to him. And I'd like us again to appreciate how hard it would probably be for us to take on that perspective. Because it's not just that Israel was defeated at some point in the past. It happened in their lifetime. It was their nation that was defeated. They probably saw the destruction with their own eyes. They were the ones taken from their land and brought into Babylon. It would be super easy, in light of the things they've seen, the things they've experienced, to either just give up hope and say, well, forget Yahweh, I'll worship whatever gods Babylon is worshiping. Or maybe to worship other gods kind of out of spite. Think about how easy it might be to hate God if you went through the things that Daniel and his friends went through. And yet they're committed to staying true to the one true God. And this seems so opposite from when we were looking at Job earlier in the year. Think about all the horrible things that happened to Job, and Job's wife said, well, if all this happened, why don't you just curse God and die? That was one perspective, but Daniel and his friends take a very different one. And so in light of that, I just wanted to throw this out as food for thought. If you all would like to comment as well, of course, you're more than happy to, but just want us to think about our own lives and maybe ask ourselves, what kind of perspective do we take on? Do we look at life from that more earthly perspective, or do we see it from a heavenly one? Especially when things around us seem to take turns for the worst. I mean, this was a turn for the ultimate worst for God's people. When life seems to turn against us, what perspective do we take? And which perspective we take will probably determine how we navigate life when it seems to kind of crumble. So that was something that was moving to me that I wanted to share. Does anyone maybe have anything they'd like to add to that? Mary, are we live streaming, Chastity?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll get the microphone to you, Mary. Thank you.
You know, I was thinking about that even this morning. I was not asleep, I was just kind of But, you know, I was thinking about that because, you know, if he telling you, if you don't bow down to me, what's going to happen to you? And they still stood strong. You know, we are not going to bow down to you. We are not going to worship you. We're going to worship our God and not your gods. So now, just think about that today. You know, with the way society is, you know, they keep prying on you and prying on you. After so long, you're like, okay, I'll just give in and do what you want. I mean, it's hard, but then you stop and think about it. It's easier to give in rather than hold out if you're the only one.
Yeah.
Because everybody's looking at you like, why can't you just go along with the crowd? And after so long, people do that. They just say, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to go along with it. But these people did not.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I love about that. You know, we are going to worship our God, not your gods.
Well, and so that's an incredible commitment just on its own. Like, if let's say the setting had been very different. Say that these three men had lived in the greatest days of Israel and they never left the land, and they had all their fellow Jews around them, and life was great when they served God. And then someone said, bow down. Well, it'd still be, or be thrown into a furnace. It'd still be amazing they said, no, we're not going to do that. But imagine, I mean, they've been uprooted from their land. They've seen people die. They probably saw Jerusalem burning. This is the complete, like, just crushing of their world. And God oversaw that. And yet they still say, it doesn't matter. You know, we've been kicked around. We're going through the worst there is to go through. You know, of course, in this time they're in the king's court and stuff, but they've lived through that, and yet they say, we're still committed to him.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah, even after you talk about how they're going, this furnace is going to be what, come in this time harder. I mean, I'm thinking, I don't want to burn. So
Yeah.
just think about it. It's going to be even harder than just putting you into just a regular furnace. You're going to be in there like 3 or 4 times more, and it's going to be harder than that.
Yeah.
And they still said, I'm going to bow down to him. I'm not going to bow down to you. I'm going to worship our God.
Yeah,
So that takes a lot, I mean, that's a lot of faith there.
yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
I think for me, it's evolved. So, like, sorry. It's evolved for me. So, probably a decade ago, I would have been weak to the struggles of this world and this life. But I think over time, growing in his word and in my faith, and that now I'm not going to say that life is easy, but it's definitely, I have different perspectives. Even in my prayer life, I would pray for, why is this happening? But now, please, you know, do this for me. But now it's like, just give me strength to endure through what your will be done. Yeah. So for me, it's. I'm not going to say that I would be perfect, but I would definitely have a different perspective than I did maybe 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to see that it's evolved.
Yes.
Near the close of the sermon, I tried to drive home. This doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It can be a journey to get to this point of faith. But God honors that journey. He blesses it. And so, yeah, it's great that you've been able to see, and I hope we can all look back on our lives and see how our faith has grown and been strengthened over time. Absolutely. Well, let's go back into Daniel chapter 3 for a bit. Another observation that I'd like to share with you all Daniel chapter 3. This is in the midst of the whole fiery furnace episode as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have been kind of ratted out, and they're being brought before the king. He wants them to bow down. So they say no in verses, let's see. Oh, no, they're accused in verse 12. And then in verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar is very upset. He brings them in. And this is kind of his opening statement. Nebuchadnezzar, verses 14 and 15 in chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Something that seems to me, looking at the way the king words what he says here, is thinking about what the king really wants out of this whole exchange. What he really wants is he just wants them to bow down. You know, he's not saying you can't pray to your God. He's not saying you can't, respect his laws for you in your private life. He's not saying you can't read those scriptures anymore. He's saying, I just want you to bow down. You know, I don't. Beyond that, he doesn't really care, probably, because, and this is something I mentioned in the sermon, bowing down it's not just about he's very religious. This is also a way of unifying the empire. If everyone will worship this God, that shows we're all on the same page, we're all loyal, we're not going to rebel, and so for the Jews to not bow down shows, well, these guys, they might cause trouble, right? But he just wants them to bow down. And beyond that, they're fine to keep on being Jewish people. And we can imagine maybe the pressure Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would feel to say, if just this one moment, I just bow down right here, well, then I can go pray for forgiveness afterwards, and then I can keep on trying to be, faithful. But I was thinking about, actually occurred to me as I was reading some about Daniel 3, an important, powerful parallel for today. It's very much a part of our world that religion is fine as long as it's private. It's perfectly fine for you to go to church, perfectly fine for you to pray, it's perfectly fine for you to believe in Jesus, but once it starts to maybe collide with society's values and society's outlook on the world and practices, well, then there's a problem. And that's what we don't want. Just keep your religion to yourself, but when you enter into public life, you just need to do what public life does. And of course, we can easily slip into this. We're human beings, and we can very easily make our religion a purely private matter, but maybe do all kinds of things that are actually contrary to our faith when we get out maybe into public life. And so here I think we have a great example from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that they realize their faith is not just a private matter, and the king may not care what we do after we bow down or not, but we know what's really going on when we bow down. The king thinks he knows what's going on. He thinks it's just about loyalty to him and uniting the nation and stuff, but we know that there's a deeper spiritual reality here. And so there's a great example, I think, in what they do. They just don't bow down. And I think it's important that when they don't bow down, notice that Daniel 3 does not say that they make a big fuss about it. If they had social media at the time, it's not necessarily that they take to social media and go on a crusade about why they won't bow down. Or it's not like they're passing out pamphlets saying, this is why we're not bowing down. They just don't bow down. They don't make any fuss about it, but they just won't bow down. And then other people realize they aren't bowing down, and they make a fuss about it. They bring them to the king and accuse them. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're just living their lives, and they're just not going to bow down, and they're just going to see what happens. But then when others do take notice and do get upset and do bring them before the king, now it's an opportunity to bear witness. Right now the Lord has actually opened a door for them to show their faith in God and for God to show his faithfulness and God to show that he's the true God. And so that, I think, is just a great model for living in a world that has one set of values and might say they value your religion but just want you to keep it private, is not necessarily to throw a big fuss about it, but just keep being faithful, and the world will notice, and when they notice, it's an opportunity to bear witness. That's exactly what happens here with these three guys. Does that make sense? I also wonder if this might explain, maybe you've wondered before, I have at least, where Daniel is during all this. You know, it's just Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, is Daniel like bowing down before the image or something? I don't think we're supposed to conclude that, because Daniel is presented as this thoroughly godly person. Maybe he also just wasn't bowing down, but he didn't get ratted out like his three friends did. And so Daniel just kept on going, not bowing down to the image, which is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have done. But in their case, some who basically wanted to do away with them, took advantage of the situation. Brought
And
them
his
before the
name
king.
literally means God is my judge.
Daniel?
Yeah,
Oh, thanks for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
What did she say?
The name Daniel means God is my judge.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's a prophet, come on.
Yes, the whole second half of the book is his prophecy, well, interpretation of visions and things like that God shows him. Yeah. Nathaniel.
An observation that I had was, I haven't read through all of Daniel in a little bit, so I was just kind of skimming through it. And an observation that I had was that this was all happening during the dedication ceremony for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at first I was like, well, what about the rest of the Jews? Like, I wonder if, if they had had the opportunity to, if they all would have fallen face down in front of it, would they have been pressured? Or was it just that these three were selected, and happened to say, okay, well, we're not going to, so.
Yeah.
I wonder, it'd be easy for maybe three people out of the church to feel faithful enough to, to stand and not bow before it. But if you get the whole church,
Yes.
one thing can lead to another. If you're not strong in your faith, you're going to bow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great point. And this is something that I actually wondered about too, preparing the sermon, and I just didn't really have time to look into it. It kind of sounds like, because you're right, it's the dedication. It kind of sounds like, starting in verses 2 and 3, that it's all of these government officials, who were gathered together, which would still be a lot of people, all across the kingdom. And it may be that this command to bow down is primarily for them, right? Because they'll be at the dedication ceremony. But then when you look at what the herald in verse 4 is supposed to proclaim, you were commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear all this, you're all supposed to bow down. And so maybe the command is primarily for all these officials, but of course, it's going to be a loud blast of music. And maybe the idea is everyone who's living in the capital city, who's within earshot of this, should also bow down. Maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right, though, that it still doesn't explain where Daniel is. He's not mentioned.
Yeah.
But he would have also been one of the officials. It says the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all other provincial officials, which
Yeah.
Daniel would have fallen into. So.
Yeah. And yet he's not turned in, right? In verse 12, right, they say there are certain Jews whom you've appointed over the affairs of the province, and he names these three. But yeah, he's not turned in. My guess is still that he's probably not bowing down and they just didn't pick him. I wouldn't be surprised if these folks accused these three because they had their own reasons. Maybe they already didn't like them. Maybe they saw them as political threats and wanted them out of the way, and this was a great opportunity to do that. So maybe Daniel somehow was not on their radar for some reason.
You were talking about why weren't you don't know if other people were bowing down to him, the idol. A lot of times when God would allow them to be taken over by another country is because they weren't being faithful.
Yeah.
And so it's highly possible that people were bowing down just because they
Yeah.
didn't have that faith.
Good point. Because, yeah, prior to being taken off into captivity, a lot of folks were already well in the habit of doing that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, one other observation I'd like to make that can have also great application for our lives, I think. I want to focus on this issue of idolatry. You know, the king sets up this image, and they're supposed to bow down before it, so they're supposed to worship an idol. And idolatry really is the big problem all throughout the Old Testament with Israel. And if you think about it, it's really the big problem for our spiritual lives always. You know, is God going to be number one, or is something or someone else going to be? And so this is this is the biggest issue. All the other things kind of flow out of idolatry. It's when God is not number one that they're going to be engaged in, sexual sin. They're going to be oppressing the poor. They're going to be doing all kinds of ungodly things because something else becomes number one. Well, one way that the writers of the Bible sometimes respond to the threat of idolatry is to mock idolatry, to kind of make fun of it, and to show how really stupid it is to worship an idol. Often they take it very seriously. It's very, not somber, but very serious tone. But then sometimes they kind of change the tone and they make fun of idols. The Bible does this a few times. Isaiah is one place where this happens. But one example that it kind of happens is in Psalm 115. This especially came to mind because Nathaniel and Daisy and I and a few others were reading through the Bible in a year together, and this was recently a reading for us. Psalm 115, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 8. Not to us, O Lord, it begins, not to us, but to your name give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. And then here's kind of the mocking part, starting verse 4. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths but do not speak, eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, noses but do not smell. They have hands but do not feel, feet but do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. So the idol is stupid. I mean, it has no intelligence because it has no consciousness, right? It can't speak, it can't feel, it can't see. And then in verse 8, those who make them become like them. You will become just as dumb as they are, right, if you worship the idols. Another great place, again in Isaiah, if you'd like to look it up, you can. I can't remember exactly where, but it's talking about the idol and how, they may use the wood to make a fire or whatever, and they may use the wood for some other purpose or the copper or whatever, but then they take some of it aside and they make an idol. And then they bow down to it. And isn't that so foolish? I mean, Isaiah is just mocking the whole idea of idolatry. Well, with this idea in mind of the Bible sometimes making fun of idolatry as a way to combat idolatry, go back with me now to Daniel and just see if some of chapter 3 reads a little bit differently. Daniel 3, I'm going to read a good stretch. I'm going to read the first 14, I'll read the first 15 verses. So, good stretch of the story. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of all the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" And then, of course, things continue. But notice the love of lists in the 14 verses we just read. A couple times we read about all these lists of all these counselors who were supposed to come, prefects, the satraps, the counselors, all these folks. Then we get, I think, 3 different times the list of all the instruments that are going to play at one moment. And the repetition of these lists, I think it's kind of, I don't know that it's necessarily doing this. This is more of an idea, but I think there's traction to it. So let me just throw it out and you can see what you think. I think it's meant to kind of represent the grandeur of the moment. This is this great golden image. These really wealthy, important, powerful people are going to come. There's going to be this massive blast of music, and maybe it's going to be just a massive blast. Maybe it's going to be a well-written piece of music for all these instruments. But it's going to be huge, and everyone's going to bow down. All right, so that sounds really grand and magnificent and intimidating if you're a Jew. But you can also read it as kind of a parody or a satire on this whole thing. Like, it's so huge, there's so much pomp and circumstance around this ridiculous idol that it's kind of funny. Like, they're going to get the counselors and the prefects and the satraps, and they just tell us every time, and then they tell us all these instruments every time. Like, it becomes so big and so grand that it's kind of comical. Does that make sense? You can kind of read Daniel that way a little bit, just mocking how ridiculous it is that people would bow before this image that the king set up. And in the midst of all this ridiculousness, you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are very calm, cool, level-headed, and committed to God. And so maybe part of what's going on here is maybe people reading the book of Daniel long after these events have happened, maybe they're meant to kind of smile here at how foolish, how ridiculous this whole scenario is. And that makes Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego all the wiser and all the more, it makes them just even greater examples of faithfulness, that they were faithful in the midst of all this just foolishness really happening around them. And so a good lesson we can get, I'll get to you in just a second, Mary, but a good lesson we can get kind of from this, and if you don't necessarily think the mocking of idolatry is happening here, it's definitely happening in other parts of the Bible. And so it's still a good lesson we can get, is that anything we worship other than God, it's really just laughably inferior. You know, it can be, when we think about it in the abstract, it can be like comical how foolish it is to pursue something other than God in life. And so idolatry is a very serious matter. The Bible knows that. It doesn't make light of it. But one of the ways it tries to pull us away from it is to make us step back and realize, like, it's so is so foolish to do something else. It's so foolish to pursue something other than God. And there's a great quote that I didn't look up before this. It just came to mind, so I'm going to paraphrase it. But it's from Martin Luther, the man who is responsible for the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s. He kicked the whole thing off. But he, to paraphrase this quote, he says, the devil, for all of his cunning and determination to tempt and bring people into sin, all of his evil, he cannot stand to be mocked. He will flee when he's mocked. And he writes that as C.S. Lewis quotes that as he's introducing a book called The Screwtape Letters that I'm sure you've read, Chastity.
Yeah.
And the book is hilarious. It's very insightful, but it's also hilarious.
Yes,
and-
you apply today. With
Yeah.
the letter you're written.
And so, anyways, this is one strategy the Bible uses to help people resist idolatry. And we can remember that in our own lives. The things we might pursue other than God are just like laughably inferior to Him. There's no contest. And when we take a step back and realize that, it kind of helps us not pursue those things. So, anyways, Mary, you had your hand up a second ago.
Well, I was just thinking in verse 15, it's like the king is like, I'm giving you a second chance.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what it's going to be really like here. You got to hear all these different sounds.
Yeah.
Thank you. You like that, don't you? You're going to hear all these different sounds and everything. I'm going to make it sound so good that you're going to really want to bow down. I'm giving you this second chance, to do it. But hey, what happened? Never.
Yeah.
And it felt like, today we, like I said, we keep talking about things for long enough, and we think, okay, if I keep talking to you enough about it, you're gonna change your mind. You're gonna come and do what I want you to do, more so than what's right or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what King Nebuchadnezzar is hoping, is if I can pull them aside, give them one more chance, kind of point to the fiery furnace over there, they'll comply, they'll do it. And of course, that's not the way it works. Does anyone else have anything either related to these kind of three things I've shared, or anything else related to this really powerful passage from Daniel that maybe you'd like to share for us tonight? Nathaniel.
So we had a pretty cool experience a couple of years ago. We went to Winterfest in Gatlinburg. It was 2020, so it was right before COVID. But it was just a few of us, and so we weaseled our way in to get some really good seats. And the theme was about all of Daniel, particularly.
Oh, really?
There were different, they had like the Lion's Den, they had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had, some different parts to the story. But we had this really cool experience where we found some good seats, and we were sitting next to some teenagers, just as could be. And the lesson happened to be about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now you're talking about the Gatlinburg Convention Center is full. It's got 7,000 to 8,000 people sitting there. And the speaker on stage said, so do you know what this would look like? Talking about, everybody bowing down and three guys aren't. You know what this would look like? It would look something like this. They turned the house lights on so you could see everybody in there. The three kids next to us stood up.
Oh, yeah.
And so you see 8,000 people sitting and these three boys stand up. And it was just this really powerful experience to demonstrate what this would have looked like. Three people, these three guys made such an impact.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We can forget when we're just when we're just reading it, we can not always visualize it very well. So that's really powerful. Yeah. Anything else? Daisy.
One of the other, he's talking about this being kind of comical. It made me think back to when they made the golden calf, when they were waiting on Moses, and all the drama that went along with that, and how you read it, and like, why would you even think of doing that?
Yeah.
And the fact that it says, this calf brought us out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and maybe there again, I realize this is a little bit of speculation, but I don't think it's out of bounds or anything. If you're an Israelite, and if you experience that, of course it's a very serious moment. A lot of people die, and it huge consequences. It's terrible. If you're reading it many generations later, and maybe you're a child being raised in the synagogue, and you read like, this cow brought us out of Egypt, like it kind of highlights how foolish it is to put something else in place of God. And that kind of lightheartedness actually is a way of driving home. It's a way of us actually applying the text faithfully. It encourages us to do that. All right, well, if there's nothing else, let's wrap up with a word of prayer. I've done way too much talking tonight. So, Bob, would you like to say our closing prayer as we wrap up?
Father God, as we bow to you this afternoon with our heads bowed, our hearts humble unto you, we thank you so much, dear God, for allowing us to see this wonderful, glorious day you've given us to enjoy. This bright, sunshiny day. Let us not forget also the rain and storms, etc., that come our way as well. But because of that, you know what's best for all of us. We thank you so much for this lesson tonight concerning Daniel. And we pray and trust the lesson that has sunk into our hearts may generate into us, that it may become a part of our everyday activities. We thank you so much, dear God, for your darling Son that hung on an old cross of Calvary. At this time, go with those that can't be with us tonight because of sickness or other conditions that they cannot control. Go with us and stand by us, that we may be able to meet again upon the first day of the week. Go with us and stand by us. Forgive us for our many sins. We ask you bless us in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you all.